the worst that it's ever performed on S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the US. It had a really bad 10 years that if you put money into day one, 10 years later, you just broke even. So that tells you in the history of US stock market, if you put your investment in and you wait for more than 10 years, you would be making money.
Welcome to Connected Sidelines, coming to you from the heart of Taipei, a show in which we get personal on issues that connect us all in Taiwan and around the world. I'm Divya Gopalan.
And I'm Shieh. It's been a bumpy few weeks for the markets. With even more geopolitical uncertainty coming our way, we want a clearer picture on what's on the horizon for equities and the economy in Taiwan.
And its two biggest trading partners, the US and China. And there's no better person to do that with us than our next guest, Orina Chang, an investor, entrepreneur, and chair and vice dean at the School of Banking and Finance at National Sun Yat-sen University, where you and your colleagues are shaping the next generation of finance professionals. Great to have you on the show, Orina.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. And it's my honor.
It's so nice for us to have you here. Let me start by getting you to tell us a little bit about that program at Sun Yat-sen University that you are the chair and dean of.
This is my favorite part. Thank you for asking. So I'm actually a chair professor. So the program was initially envisioned by our former president of Taiwan, Tsai Ing-wen, to train the next generation of asset managers. So her idea was that, Taiwan is getting increasingly richer. Domestic wealth is building. But unfortunately, we don't have a lot of finance professionals in Taiwan to help manage their money, and it's always relying on outside managers, particularly in Hong Kong and in the US. So the school was established and set up to train our own students to actually go into this field. And the difference between this particular school to the regular programs that already exist in Taiwan is that instead of hiring academic professors, we try to get practitioners worldwide from different parts of the world to come and give instructions and to give the students actual experiences in the real world finance. So it's been really exciting for me to be teaching here for the past 2 years. And I actually feel a huge difference with the students that I've been interacting with. All our instructions are in English. So they're really well connected, globally. And secondly, I really do feel like I'm making an impact and a contribution to Taiwan.
All right, so we're going to put some of that knowledge you have as a professional to test, and also the skills you have as a lecturer by getting you to explain some of the things that Fred and I and our viewers want to know about the economy, about the outlook, and basically about what's happening right now in the market. So Fred, go for it.
You're obviously very experienced in the financial world. What's your outlook on the markets in 2026?
My outlook for 2026 is actually really positive. US is always the leading market globally. So when the US does well, Taiwan follows. So usually if you see the previous day trading in the US, Taiwan, if it goes up, Taiwan usually follows suit. This is an election year for Trump, and we have learned from last year's experience that Trump is very pragmatic, right? He knows how to actually, I wouldn't say manipulate the market, but how to shape the market into moving into a certain direction that he wants to, So I would say that for an election year, he would try to maintain the market on, a pretty stable footing so that he would actually still keep the house.
So, the rule of thumb of where the U.S. goes, Taiwan usually follows. Can you explain why that is?
Taiwan is not a very big market, right, in terms of the equity market. And there are a lot of foreign investors into Taiwan's equity market. So whenever there is risk on or risk off from the U.S., a lot of it is the same amount of money that's moving in and out of Taiwan. So that actually in itself is a big player in Taiwan. And then when the foreign investments move in and out, the local people always follow as well.
What are some of the things investors in Taiwan can look out for in the U.S. economy right now?
If we're talking about macro sort of factors that impact the U.S. stock market, so there's always a difference between the stock market and the economy, right? Because stock market is usually the leading indicator of the economy. So a lot of times the market is up, but the economy might not be so good. But if we look at the stock market on the macro level, I would say that the two most important factors are its interest rate and its employment rate. And, obviously inflation as well. So if you look back in 2025, when Trump got elected and started, saying baby drill baby and, started with all this tariff that is anti sort of the traditional economic theory, the market was very volatile. Everyone was really worried in 2025. But when the inflation number continued to kind of drop in 2025, the market was hitting all-time high, right? And then you have employment rate that stay pretty steady. And Trump cut spending from the Fed, right? The biggest government spending that was fueling inflation. So when he did all that, the market was doing really well. So I would say that not just 2026, I would say, when you're watching on the macro side, those would be your biggest indicator of how the stock market would do. And then with the stock market being the leading indicator, I would say that the general overall economy pretty much follows suit.
Right. Speaking of the employment rate, the latest jobless figures or employment figures weren't very rosy for the U.S. In fact, there was a drop. Now, I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but basically it was not very encouraging. Firstly, what was, given that the economy has been chugging along, what do you think is behind that?
There was a huge cut by Amazon, right? Amazon had the biggest cut in its jobs since 2008, maybe, if I remember the number right. Everything that is being impacted by AI, right? So when I was working at Morgan Stanley, all the jobs that were cut in operations, all my assistants, they were not being replaced. The firm's focus was to really invest in AI, to build up the system, to automate a lot of the work, such as operations, compliance, anything that is really kind of standard documentational type of things. I think that Amazon is doing the same thing. Everyone is looking into AI as the future of efficiency, of kind of replacing a lot of these young, entry-level, white-collar professional jobs.
So how far behind is Taiwan compared to the U.S.? What do you think?
Well, I think Taiwan is probably, 3 years behind. I think in the past, Taiwan is usually much, much more behind. But I think AI is just sweeping, the world right now. And I don't think Taiwan can really hide that much. I was talking to a student of mine. Actually, he's not my student. He's my engineer. He helps me to develop some website. And he's a second-year master's student about to graduate in, I think, August is what he told me. And he said jobs are so hard to find now. If you look at the last version of ChatGPT, the way it can code, it can write codings for software codings to the most current ChatGPT version, the codes went from, a few hundred lines to like hundreds of thousands of lines now in coding, right? You just can use ChatGPT and a lot of other AI to code for you. So those jobs are definitely disappearing. And Taiwan being, so focused on technology, I would think it's going to feel the pain quite quickly.
So it's just not just the blue-collar jobs, white-collar jobs too.
Actually, I think the blue-collar jobs are going to be the one that will stay longer. Yeah, they will be much better protected, until the robots come out that, Elon Musk is trying to do. That's a few years away from now.
It's interesting. In one of our connected podcasts, we did speak to two young Gen Z fresh graduates, and both of them had a very gloomy outlook on their job prospects. As you said, AI is taking away a lot of the jobs that young people would have started doing in their careers. Conversely, though, AI is just fueling a lot of the stock market gains that we're seeing, particularly in the US. Can you see that continuing?
Oh, definitely. Of course. I think when investing in the stock market, people focus a lot on the ups and downs, daily swings of the stock market, and kind of forget the fundamentals of these companies and the industries, right? So a lot of those ups and downs are very emotional. They're emotional issues. So when there is a war going on, when Trump decided to wage a war, people get very nervous. And then they start moving their money around, right? They start to take risks off the table to kind of watch what's going on and kind of see what's going to happen. A lot of that is institutional money, and they have to. That's kind of their job, right? Because they don't have the luxury of waiting for things to play out because they might lose their business as a money manager. But for retail investors or for people like you and I who are not managing, mega billion trillion dollars, we can actually wait. So if we're able to actually wait for that emotion to play out, on a daily basis and really focus on the fundamentals, we can actually be much better investors. And AI is a trend that is not going to reverse. So regardless of what the day-to-day emotion is with, the other factors and the noise in the market, we know that AI is unstoppable.
But in the early months of 2026, a lot of analysts are saying that these tech companies are way overvalued. What's your opinion on that?
I was an intern for 2 months and on a sell-side research, which is what you refer to as an analyst. There's really not that much time to really put into researching a company. And there's really not that much time into putting into building financial models. We revise our statement all the time, right? When the market keeps going up, we chase the market. When it keeps going down, we also, move down. I wouldn't really pay too much attention. And also analysts have very different opinions from all different firms, depending on who it is.
So from what you've said, and you were just saying about the institutional investors at times like this and uncertainty, with what's going on in and around Iran and oil prices going to unprecedented highs, I guess. What we're seeing institutional investors do is move their money to safe haven. So this is where we see inflows into gold and commodities.
Yeah.
But for the average investor, where you're not managing other people's money, you're saying wait it out.
So if you look at the US stock market and you do a historical kind of pricing, you would see that the worst that it's ever performed on S&P 500, which is the 500 biggest companies in the US, is 10 years. It had a really bad 10 years that if you put money into day one, 10 years later, you just broke even. You did not lose money and you did not win, you did not make money. So that was the 10 years kind of the worst stretch. And we call that, I think, the last decade. So that tells you in the history of US stock market, if you put your investment in and you wait for more than 10 years, you would be making money. Like if you catch the worst timing ever, right? 10 years later, you broke even. So always keep that in mind as a regular investor. If you kind of get in and out as a institutional investor, you're gonna get, kind of wiped out. Mm-hmm. It's the worst way of investing. That is not called investing. That is called trading. And, I would advise that with every market, except you need to be diversified. A lot of people I see, they invest in one stock. That company can go bankrupt. So it doesn't matter how long you wait.
You said all markets. So Taiwan, many people say it's really grown. The market's really shot through the roof in 2025. For investors, should you keep investing in the market? Expecting it to go further?
Well, I think when people say that, it's mostly talking about TSMC, right? Taiwan Semiconductor, because I think that accounts for 40% of the index in Taiwan. And that points to two things. One is that Taiwan doesn't have enough companies that's listed, that's healthy, right? That's number one. And number two, Well, it's pretty much the same thing, is that Taiwan Semiconductor is the market. And so that's why, when you say Taiwan is hitting an all-time high and is it going to continue? Well, then we're really talking about, is TSMC going to continue to perform? That's really kind of the gist of it. I would say yes, right? Because it's really a monopoly, right? It supplies more than 90% of the high-end chips, and no one else could do that. And when Taiwan Semiconductor started to set up plants everywhere globally, in Japan, in US, now it's going to Germany, it's just going to reduce that Taiwan discount, right? Because a lot of the foreign investors feel the geopolitical, and I think, Fred, you alluded to it earlier when you opened the show, is that there's a lot of geopolitical kind of concerns everywhere globally, especially with Taiwan. And a lot of that is Taiwan being misunderstood because of some kind of media saying Taiwan is the most dangerous place on earth. There's going to be an impending war and all that kind of sentiment. But, one thing that is true is that to manufacture and produce all these chips, you do need a lot of power and a lot of water. And so when you go globally into different areas and into the markets of your customers, that reduces the Taiwan discount, which is actually really good for Taiwan Semiconductor. I think maybe about 7 years ago, the PE ratio, which is price to earning ratios, that's how we kind of look at company stock price, was about 20 times for Taiwan Semiconductor. Today is about 33 times. So you're kind of closing that Taiwan discount, right? Mm-hmm. So as Taiwan Semiconductor gets more and more global, that discount should get smaller and smaller. So if you ask me about the future of Taiwan stocks or Taiwan equity market, I would say that, if we continue to see that Taiwan Semiconductor being the dominant force in Taiwan, then, and it's moving global and it's having a monopoly market, I think it's actually fantastic.
You talk about Taiwan being the most dangerous place on earth. So we have to talk about China. It's the second biggest economy in the world. It's many countries' biggest trading partner, but they have just lowered its growth targets in 2026. What's happening in China?
I think the Chinese economy is really, really, really doomed, and it's so bad, right? I think it's actually a lot worse than what it's reporting. For a really long time, China has been kind of relying on its low labor cost manufacturing. A lot of Taiwanese companies went to China to set up factories. And we probably in the studio, many of us would know a lot of our friends that are actually doing that type of manufacturing in China. I think a lot of them have slowly moved out. Even over the past few years, because the wages are just rising, right? And they had a one-child policy, so the population was really declining. You don't have that demographics, or it's losing its advantages for cost of labor. And now it's getting even worse and worse, right? So a lot of these people actually have moved out. And then, another thing is the tariff, right? The tariff was a huge hit on China. I just saw on Bloomberg today that 25% of the iPhone is now being manufactured in India, right? Oh. So it's actually moving away from China. Some of them are moving domestic. So I think a lot of these numbers that China puts out, the forecast, I don't know how accurate it is. I think however negative it says, is going to be a lot worse than what it is, right? The real estate market is, that had been fueling the market is now completely gone. The cost of labor is rising. There's actually deflation in the country. So there's not real domestic consumption to support that. So in every area, every industry that you look, it's just not sending a very good message.
And what is that going to impact globally if China's economy continues to tank?
I don't really think it's going to really impact globally. I think it's going to impact China itself. I think a lot of these manufacturing jobs are going to be moved away. Vietnam is a big hub right now. And then there are other places that are trying to kind of take away that market that China used to have. So I don't really see that there's a huge impact. In fact, I think it might be good for the US, right? That has been what Trump is trying to do to make America great again, the mega, right? So hopefully all these investments that are being moved to the US, hopefully, I say hopefully because I'm also American, is going to create jobs, in the US to kind of counter what we're seeing on the negative impact of job cuts by AI. So a lot of these jobs that are being moved to the US are actually, manufacturing jobs that really need manpower.
In general, then, do you see more outflows, investor outflows out of China to different parts, and you're hoping to Taiwan and the US? Is that the direction it's going to be going?
I think that Taiwan is not going to benefit from that because we've historically never been in that market to be kind of manufacturing anything with really inexpensive labor, right? So I don't think that part is not moving to Taiwan, but I do think that Taiwan is going to benefit from the rise of AI. So I think our chips is a really big thing. And, the semiconductor ecosystem is a huge ecosystem. It's not just about Taiwan Semiconductor. It's about a lot of other players, right? And many of them are here situated in Taiwan. I think that's really going to help.
But when you talk about China losing its low labor costs, how can the US compete? I thought the labor cost is through the roof.
Yeah, so the U.S., the way that they try to compete is by placing tariffs. If our labor is so expensive, and in the past, what we are doing is outsourcing these jobs to cheaper areas, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make your product a lot more expensive so that you can't compete with me when you try to sell it to me.
And so finally then, what would you say are the sectors we need to look at despite all the uncertainty? You feel like these ones will remain robust and it's where you should go if you're playing the long game?
Okay, so as a teacher, I would say I would separate people into two different groups, professional investors and non-professional investors, right? Professional investors, we know that this is going to be the start of AI, right? And robots. Okay, so I don't think there's any question about that. So if you play the long game and you're diversified enough, you should be in these sectors. But it might be very, very long. Right, it's going to be hard to predict. I think AI is much closer than robots. We already see the impact of AI and how these software companies' valuation was like completely chopped in half and continue to keep on getting down. So we see that AI is there and it's going to continue to grow. So we don't have to really think about when. You just kind of have to write it, right? Robots, we don't know yet. Like there are a lot of innovations when you go to these Vegas shows and, even like Computex, maybe this year we can see. There are many things that people are trying to do, but I don't think we're there yet. But I do think that these are the biggest area for a retail investor or regular investor. They should be super diversified. Don't try to bet on one company, one technology, who's going to come out as a winner. Just buy a whole big basket, right? You know that one of these days, one of these companies are going to be the winner, right? And the losers are just going to kind of naturally be weeded out. As a professional investor, you're looking at these companies all day. You have a lot more access to information. You know what to look for. You can go into the company. You can visit their sites. You can talk to their CEO. You can speak to their CFO. So for those people, they might be able to pick the winner rather than just a whole basket. But I think the easiest thing is to buy a whole basket and just kind of sleep away and let your money grow.
That is the dream, Orina.
Did I tell you when my son was born about 18 years ago, in the US, we have this account that we can put money in for their college tuition. And, I just put it into an ETF, like a diversified basket of stocks and large cap growth. That's what I picked, large cap growth. So biggest companies that are in technology that are growing. So now it's 18 years forward. You would not believe the rate of return annually. If you annualize the rate of return on average, do you guys want to take a shot? What percent?
I think if I take a guess, it's only going to make me upset.
Take a guess.
Okay. Really, really optimistic, beating any yields, bond yields, beating long-term deposits, beating 15%.
Okay, what about you?
50.
50
Yeah.
a year?
Well,
You're being very, very optimistic. So the U.S. S&P 500 annually is about 12%. Okay. So this was 18% every year.
Wow.
For 18 years.
So he's about to enter university in a very expensive university.
he has
so
a lot of
is he
money.
covered? Is he covered?
He's covered until like PhD and beyond, So what I'm trying to tell everyone is, don't trade, invest, put your money in, diversify it, and forget about it. If you want to do a very conservative investment strategy, then do the entire market. But if you want to be a little more, riskier, then pick your industry. And I don't think you can go wrong with AI.
All right. So my key takeaway, don't trade, invest, and you can't go wrong with AI. Orina Chang, it's been an absolute pleasure and an education to have you here on the show today.
Can I do one closing statement? As
Please do.
Always say in our industry, don't time the market, is how much time you have in the market.
Don't time the market. It's how much time you have in the market. Okay.
Perfect.
That is my mantra.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you, Orina.
Thank you, everyone.
And which economies do you have your money on for 2026?
And how concerned are you about AI taking away jobs?
Let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, do check out our main show, Connected on TaiwanPlus.
You can find us on our YouTube channel and the TaiwanPlus website. I'm Divya Gopalan.
And Fred Shieh,
We'll see you next time.
see you next time.